Hello, 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 people, and welcome to the second episode of the Shake It to You Make It podcast. Known by some as the human Shazam, and with releases on labels such as Resonance, Hungarian Hot Wax, Duboka, and Under No Illusion, just to name a few, I am really glad to be joined by none other than Mr. Josh Gregg himself.
Hello, mate. How you doing?
Not too bad. How are you, mate?
No, I'm good, man. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be on here.
Pleasure to have you. Mate, if it's okay with you, what I wanted to do is just start off with at the beginning, really. So electronic music for you, where did it start and when did the passion develop?
I don't know, really. I've kind of always been into it, probably more so than the average child. It's hard to explain. I kind of like refer to myself as a musical sicko. And I feel like it started very early. Like I wasn't really into the same music as a lot of the other people that I knew were, which is fine. I think I spoke about it previously on something and I said I didn't have a choice because the day that I was born, my aunt and uncle were going to see Daft Punk and they found out in the crowd that I was born. And like my joke is that that's why I became super into it. And yeah, I think it was very early on. It's not like there's a particular exciting, oh, my family did X, Y, and Z thing and as a result I've always been a part of it. I think I was just super interested in electronic music sonically and culturally from quite a young age.
Gotcha. See, that's quite interesting because the reason I asked that question quite a lot is, you know, I was born in Romania and then moved over here. The sort of town that I lived in, Boston, Lincolnshire, was quite small. So I didn't really find out about proper electronic music until I really came to uni. You know what I mean? So it was quite an interesting introduction into it. And I sort of got introduced to the tech house realm, I guess, which is the first point for everyone. Did you, as far back as you can remember, what was sort of like the first genre that you started listening to?
I like super intently or just generally. Like I remember really early on loving World Hold On, Bob Sinclair on a Now CD. Yeah. And I think that tune's amazing still till today. I know it had a bit of a revival a couple of years ago. I guess I became like more into different stuff through like dubstep stuff, really.
Gotcha.
House has always primarily been my like favorite electronic music genre, but I quite like all sorts of things. I think like the early Scream and Benga days is like super influential, obviously forming into what I ended up doing. But to me, like that was super, I guess, quite different to what a lot of the people I went to school with and stuff were listening to. But then at the same time, like I grew up in Dudley, so there was a lot of like 4x4 and bassline and speed garage, which is obviously has now come totally back around. So like it wasn't that out there for me to be into electronic music at an early age.
Yeah. When I guess obviously from a production perspective, when did production come into the scene?
Yeah. So I first started messing around with like a DAW when I was probably like 12 or 13.
Was that Ableton or you?
No, I think the first thing I ever used was GarageBand, and then I got what was it called? I can't remember what the first software I ever had was actually called, but I started using FL basically. Gotcha. I used FL up until lockdown.
Yeah.
But yeah, I kind of started producing as a means to DJ. I wasn't really particularly interested in producing. I'm kind of still not now, it's a joke. But I kind of wasn't until COVID. Because it was kind of more of a functional thing of being like, I'm super into this music. I love sharing music with people. Like I used to be on MSN when I was like 11 or 12 with people coming to me being like, what new music should I listen to? Which is basically what I do now anyway. But it's bizarre thinking about it going back. And it was just more like the concept and like culture of DJing was super interesting to me. But I was also 13 or 14. And I was like, if I'm going to ever DJ or DJ at a point, I need to do something other than just doing come to a club and meet a promoter because I was 14. Yeah. So I think I started producing in order to play. That is extremely early on to be able to sort of realize that, I guess. Yeah. But I think it's also being obsessive about it. Like it wasn't like no one was guiding me. It's not like I had like friends who were doing it.
Yeah.
I was kind of doing all the research myself and being like, what is a way of doing this and figuring it out and kind of reverse engineering it. Yeah. So then like I started playing in clubs when I was like 15, 16. I put on my first party when I was 16. Yeah.
Did I not check my ID or anything?
I'm tall. I've been the same size since I was like.
I'm tall. They don't care.
6'4" people. I've been the same size pretty much since I was about 13, so no one ever asked. It's funny, like I've got like really close friends now who laugh that they still don't know how old I am because I was lying for so long. I remember when I turned 18, I was quite like deeply into all of this, and I had to tell my family, being like, don't post how old I am because all these promoters I've been playing for years are going to be like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, can I swear, by the way?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I just self-censored. I just self-censored.
I definitely have, so it's all right.
Fine.
Actually, you said something quite interesting, which I think is like, so what made you transfer from FL to Ableton? Because I think, I've had a couple of friends who've made that transition.
Yeah.
Was it anything in particular?
I've always just thought it's got better features in-house. It was more just that if I kind of circle back to what I was saying, I was producing music quite functionally to DJ. Like, I was quite regularly busy from the age of like 17, 18 to the point where if I was to go and sit down and essentially relearn how to make music, because I'm completely self-taught, it would take me out of this schedule of essentially making music to play, which is what I was kind of doing for years. So it was during COVID. Obviously, I could use it to a degree and I had dabbled previously, but it was the first time basically since I'd started doing it that I'd had enough time to kind of sit down and be like, what do I actually want to make? Shall I try and do something else? Because before it was very much like, I need to make a record to get me gigs in clubs.
Yeah.
And like the music kind of reflected that, I guess.
Yeah, not think about, can I change doors? It's like,
and not think about, anything, just like process stuff, or like, do I actually want to get more into it? Like I was saying, that I didn't really like it up until that point.
Yeah.
But I also think that's probably because I wasn't really trying to write music in a traditional sense. I was trying to functionally make it to play.
So when did that change for you? Like, obviously, because you mentioned you didn't like the music as you went along, I guess, when you first started.
Yeah.
At what point did you kind of get to a point where you started
enjoying the process,
I guess.
I think it was through COVID. Like
and that's how, just so we're clear, how many years into production is that?
I'm gonna work it out. So I would have been, in 2020, I was 22 when we went into lockdown. So it's like 8 years in, 7-8 years in, something like that, properly taking it seriously. Like 8 years.
Because I think I went back and I was looking at your discography and you started releasing in 2014, I think it was. So the only reason I'm saying this, by the way, guys, is just so you realize the amount of time it takes, you can be consistent with it and cut the time down, I think, but
it's a lot easier to learn. One, if you have people around you who already do it and you have an interest and I think the information is a lot more accessible. Also, it kind of is quite a lot easier now. Like, there are tools that make things so much easier than they used to be.
Yeah.
Also, I'm a sicko and like to go about things in a very long-winded way, and still kind of do now. But it doesn't take 8 years. Look at everyone else ever.
Yeah, true. To be fair, there are like some examples. So, okay, let me ask you a different question. What would you, to someone who's starting out producing now, based on the fact that, there are different tools available, how would you say would be a good way of going about potentially getting into producing in this day? I've got a sort of theory in my head.
Yeah, I think like the tools to me and like the process wouldn't have changed that much. I think the YouTube resources and the free resources now are so much bigger than they were even 5 years ago. Is that like through that and like watching people remake things and these make a song like this, people naturally, when they start trying to learn something, emulate what they like. And then the courses and stuff that are on offer now at like fairly reasonable rates are so engrossing. There's so much material that like, and then again, the other side is like one-on-one lessons. These type of things are very readily available and they help you get further quicker. Doing it on your own in a bedroom at 13 without having any peers to bounce off is a way that it takes you a lot longer. But I guess it's kind of like, there's no hard and fast rule to any of it. Like, my thoughts on the whole thing is basically, if you learn totally by the book how to produce technically, everyone would end up sounding the same. The mistakes and like quirks in the way that you work are kind of what ends up making someone sound like something. Like, I make quite a lot of different music, like styles of music, but I also think if you heard it, you could probably figure out it was me because of the way that I do things. And that's probably technically completely wrong if I was to learn on a course. But it's the process of kind of figuring it out myself, I guess.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so in terms of your production, actually, I know, I kind of had a discussion with Paris is Burning when he was here on the podcast in the last episode. And I sort of, there's kind of two schools of thought, I guess. There's one school of thought that basically says, kind of try to build a repertoire of samples, of presets, of something that kind of a little bit your sound, like, drum racks and presets and so on and so forth, and save that over time. He was sort of saying, and I see the point as well, which is if you start building up like templates, for example, you start limiting your creativity a little bit. Like, where do you sort of stand on that spectrum? Like, what's your take on it?
I don't use any templates. I don't have a huge amount of samples now. I used to have a massive sample library that I'd play off, and then I realized
Death by choice, yeah?
Yeah, it's death by choice. And a lot of the records that I love are produced in quite simple manners. And I think, like, I don't know, on keyboards with a certain amount of presets, and the sounds were already there. So I think kind of dialing it back, I don't know, it's a mixture really. Like, I very much creatively like to kind of start with a blank slate every time, which is probably why I end up making such varied music. Yeah. Whereas, like, I think if you're like, I want to do this, like I want to make tunes like X person and release on Y label and promote yourself in that way, which is a much, much more effective way of doing things than being a sicko. That's probably a good way to start doing it. But if you want to just kind of like see where it takes you, like, I don't know if you're familiar with the producer Afriqua.
No.
He did a Circo Loco mix that came out last week, which is 100% his own productions. But he has one hat, one kick, one clap, and is just like, that's a way that you make your songs really creative, because you stop messing around.
One hat, one
That's
clap.
all he has on his computer. And then everything else. So he makes everything else. Yeah, okay. He's like, you're not getting bogged down in kind of like sample choices because you can't. So he's like, that's one way to make sure you don't sound like anyone else, which is a really interesting perspective. I wouldn't recommend that as a starting tip, but it is a very cool perspective. So I kind of like fall slightly in between. Like, I use a lot of tools. Like, I have like sample subscription services. I don't use them to start the tracks, but they definitely help the processes to kind of like get things going. It really much varies. I'm not a very time effective producer, which I feel like that sort of thing is that I'm more of a squiggle and maybe something weird will come out and I'll love it.
When you say you're not a time effective producer, what do you mean?
I don't think I'm very, I don't know. You see people who are like, in one day I got down 3 ideas, which, to be fair, I do think I've kind of got better at doing that over the years. I'm quite clinical, but at the same time, it takes me a while to kind of get off the ground because I don't have these go-to
sounds,
presets and templates. Yeah. Because I kind of don't want to. I like the figuring out process. It feels much more natural. It's like jamming in a studio and being like, oh, that sparks an idea, rather than going, I don't know, these are the drums I use every time. It's not a right or wrong answer, really. For sure.
I think what I was saying to Paris last time he was here, to Freddie, I was basically saying to him, like, for me, I feel like it's in different stages and processes. Mm-hmm. I think for me, at the stage I'm at, which is, I need to do a lot more work on my production. I think for me, having an understanding of like creating a similar sort of sound with similar presets, similar samples, to get to a point where I kind of understand that bit really well, and then move on to something else that essentially,
I think it's a lot harder if you don't understand, like, I guess, the technical side of how to arrange a track and how to build something over a period of time, to then be like, go out and wildly make something. It's probably why, like I was saying, I only really started enjoying it later down the line. Yeah. It's because up to that point, I kind of was trying to just recreate stuff to a degree. Yeah. Whereas now I'm kind of like, don't know, does it fit anywhere? Do whatever. But like, if I like it, which is kind of how I started enjoying it more, I guess, as well. To
be fair, I think, like, because I think we touched on this point last time as well. I think when you're starting out, I think it's very difficult to do anything else but try to recreate stuff. Like, you don't know what anything is. Of course, you're going to just try to copy, a Jamie Jones tunes, whatever it might be, and just try to see, like, okay, the kick sounds like that. Oh, it cuts through the mix. Maybe it's got distortion. Maybe it's got whatever, and just try to recreate it. From a production perspective, I think one of the things that I was kind of interested with is, well, obviously you've been doing it for, like close to 10 years now or so. What have been some of your biggest challenges along the way? Is there anything that you can, because obviously, like, on a day-to-day basis, I think we all face challenges, right? And I think as we're getting frustrated with something, it might be like, my drums are not sounding groovy enough, or like just be like, my synth, it's maybe a little bit too bright. I don't know how to change it to make it fit in within my tracks a little bit better. Like, were there any periods of time where you was really frustrated during the production process, and how did you overcome that?
I think, like, the major thing for me early on was I was really frustrated with tech. I was limited by the tech. Like I had an old dying laptop that couldn't use any external plugins and couldn't do anything. And you'd have stuff in your head and you'd have something you were trying to do and you just physically couldn't execute it. And there's no real way around that aside from hopefully at some point upgrading the tech. But the positive of that was, I guess, it taught me how to do things with stock plugins that I would have never been able to. Yeah. And it's the same things. It's kind of like I learned to manipulate audio. Whereas if I had swanky plugins early on, I'd have probably just been able to sound great straight away.
Yeah.
It's how I ended up being quite good at mixing. In terms of like mix stuff, touch wood, I don't really think, I don't know, it's for someone else to say. I feel like my mixes are quite good. I feel like that's probably a strength that I'm like, there's nothing that I feel like constantly has been a thorn in my side. Like the stuff it's all improved over time. Like even the stuff I make now is 10 times better than the stuff I was making a year ago.
Yeah,
it's a constant learning process on that side. But I don't think there's ever been anything that I'm like, I can't. Aside from the tech early on, which to be honest is still kind of an issue. I feel like it never stops being an issue because you just scale up whatever you're using and the CPU scales up.
Yeah. What was when was the moment, I guess, obviously, when was the moment that you decided, like, you know what, I'm ready to release, like I'm ready to put something out? Because obviously I know 2014 was when you first released the track.
I don't know. I guess it was just straight away. It was more like I was saying. It wasn't. It was well. Kind of. If this is out in the world and people like it, I might get to DJ. That was the logic. Like, fair. And that kind of is what happened. Like, it was more just like if I create a thing that people might be interested in, and they have a reason to book me.
Yeah.
It wasn't like I really am focusing on this being great. It was just more that. There were probably also, even though it's only like 12 years ago or whatever, there were probably a lot less producers around now because the tech's a lot better now. It's a lot easier to get into it at a basic level.
Yes, very
Whereas like me being able to put something that was barely now when you listen back to it, but playable in a club kind of did differentiate you a bit. Whereas I don't really think it does anymore. It was more just like, if I get this out, it gives me something to have an in to play.
Yeah. So I mean, that kind of brings me on to like my next question, which kind of goes along the lines of, with obviously I find in this day and age, I think things just keep progressing, right? And I mean, what I mean by that is, you know, maybe 5-10 years ago, let's say for example, you were a DJ and then you started producing, and that was one way of separating yourself and basically building some sort of like identity around you, right? I think as you're saying, like the tech advances and the entry points are much smaller, right? Everyone's starting with production. There's academies now that you can join that will teach you production, so on and so forth. So then that becomes easier to accomplish in the grand scheme of things. What do you think in today's day and age is some other things you could potentially use as differentiators to you as an individual, as a DJ producer, that can help you stand out in what is really a saturated market?
It depends on the question, really. Like if it's standing out as a producer, I think it's kind of the extension of what we were talking about earlier, is kind of breaking away from the templates, reference tracks, bog standard like kind of setups that you begin with to be like, I want to sound like this person, because as the tech gets better with generative AI and other things, is that you can kind of...
We'll come back to that.
You can kind of like get very close to sounding things in a way that would have before taken an hour, 2 hours to kind of replicate, is that you can basically just get it now. So I think from a production perspective, moving forward, the stuff that's a bit more out there and interesting is only going to become more valuable. I guess from a DJing angle, like I'm probably not the best person to give advice on this because I'm not great at it. It's the content side, it's your marketing side. It's, if anything, more important than the productions early on, because that's essentially your CV. Again, I don't feel like I'm particularly qualified to tell people about this because I'm very much a music first, socials afterwards, but I'm trying.
Oh, yeah, you're definitely trying.
There you go.
I was going to sort of save this for the end, but I think we've touched on it now, so it'd be good to go into AI. Man, I don't even know where to begin with it, but I have an inkling you're going to have a lot to say on this topic.
I'll try and keep it short. No, I think a lot of people, older heads, music people, I guess I'm kind of included in that somehow at the age of 26. are terrified by AI tools in music because it essentially compromises creative songwriters, producers, original thought, in theory. AI tools have kind of been quite prevalent in like electronic music production, and I don't mean that necessarily as in like dance music. I mean just more like computer music for quite a long time already. Like Soothe has been ginormous as an EQ tool for like 5 years. Every major producer uses it, or Gullfoss as an equivalent. Like these kind of tools that dynamically adjust your music based on listening back to it have existed. So I think AI as a general term in like it's killing music is kind of a bit of a stupid opinion. The generative stuff is scary because it's getting better at a vastly like quicker rate, and every single update is like some of the stuff in the last week is insane. Like the latest 2 like generative music tools I've heard are like, they sound like finished records. It's wild. But I think in order to kind of like not be as scared of it, you've got to appreciate what it is. So it's like, if you're looking at it from a purely like creator perspective as why it's good or bad, is it's bad that someone can replicate stuff quickly, but it's only replicating what already exists. Essentially, it feeds in data and songs. My
table has no feelings. It's okay.
It feeds in like the data set, which is all of music ever in theory. And you ask it to create something like that. If you're creating original music, it can't create it very well in the same way that like with like DALL-E and the image generators, the average prompt usage for like, I was literally watching a webinar about generative AI today, and he said the average like amount of prompts that you'd have to put in to create something similar to what you actually wanted for an image thing is like 600 currently.
Prompt.
Like 600 separate, I want it to be like this, more specific to get it close to what you kind of want. So if you're making something that's a bit interesting or creative in thought, it doesn't really save you that much time because it can't create it because you've created it. So from a wider perspective, I'm not that scared because I feel like, if anything, it just kind of increases the value of original creativity. Like, I would be very concerned with other sides of music where it is kind of like, I want to make something like this, particularly like, I don't know, like library music, which they use for like in the background of TV shows or adverts, where it is kind of, I just want something that sets a mood like this. And then that gets paid to a songwriter or a producer.
Yeah.
And they make a living off it. That kind of thing is totally concerning. But from like a songwriting perspective and a productions perspective, I'm kind of like, we'll see. It depends on the regulations.
What do you mean by that?
They're currently in it's far too boring for me to explain. I don't know if the people want to hear the legal current battles, but there is essentially
I'm 100%
a UK III bill that is being debated currently with our national government position on how we're going to treat generative AI in the arts.
Gotcha.
The EU already has one. Obviously, we're not in the EU, so ours is taking a lot longer. It's probably already too late. If we're going to spend 18 months deciding what the position is, which is the current kind of state of affairs, you're gone. Because look at DALL-E 18 months ago compared to now. Like Sora, the latest model, is like generative video that looks real. So it's like that wasn't even a thing. And now 18 months on from then, you've got no chance. So God knows. I don't know.
I guess if you know in depth, but do you know what they're debating? Like what specifically?
It's essentially it's like, is it a good or a bad thing is the debate, because obviously we've got a conservative government in this country who are primarily focused on bringing in billions, trillions of pounds of inward investment from tech businesses. So it's like on one side, you've got tech trillionaires, billionaires offering you all the money in the world going, this is a great thing for your economy, which is in recession. And on the other side, you've got artists, creators who make billions of pounds for your economy, but you kind of don't really see the value in them traditionally. It's getting a bit political. That's nice. Yeah, that's the debate, which is a stupid debate because it's clearly not a great thing, but I don't know. Anyway.
No, fair, yeah. I think it's quite interesting because I think I've spent some time. One of my friends, Lara, actually posted something today that I sort of watched, and he was just kind of talking about, he was, you know, a little bit of the same opinion as me, really, which is he was a little bit scared of what would the implication be on us as artists, you know? Because you start thinking, like, you know, as you've spent 6, 7 years, 8 years, whatever it might be, like learning production, to then now sort of try and be replaced by AI. But to be fair, you've made a very good point, because I think ultimately production is a way of expressing yourself, right?
Yeah.
So it's creative and original in its sense. And I think on the other hand, when you've mentioned, I didn't think about it this way, but I think when you've mentioned that you have to do 600 prompts on average, that basically means that you have to know what the hell you're prompting in the first place, right?
Yeah.
So you need to know production of like, okay, so I want this sound to sound like this, you know, square
Exactly.
waves, whatever
to the
it
point
might
where
be.
it's kind of like it's all dependent on how good the tech gets, because it's so much better on the music side anyway. It's so much better than it even was 3 months ago.
Yeah.
So maybe you won't need that many prompts in the future, but it's still, there needs to be the creative input in the first place for it to exist. My thing about the creativity is more that, like, I would be much more concerned if it was like, say, from my own perspective, if I was a producer who, and this isn't a bad thing, like I don't care if people use loops or whatever, I'm not here to go, this is a terrible idea. It's more like if your process was like, use a kick from a pack, use a clap from a pack, use a bass line from a splice pack, and just layer it like that and arrange it, because that is the sort of thing that could be replicated quite easily. Again, like I said earlier, the mistakes you make kind of are what makes it sound like you. And I feel like as long as you have something that sounds like you, it can't really be replicated unless you're the model they use. And if you're the model that the AI uses, you're probably doing quite well.
Yeah.
So, could be worse.
Are there any rules around kind of royalties and that type of thing?
This is the legal
This
debate.
is part of
this is the legal debate. So the other side is basically, do you want to get deep into this?
Mate, I'm all ears. If you want to get into it, we can get into it. If not,
I work as a music publisher during the day, so it very much
about to get there.
It very much is the debate. Yeah, and God knows. So essentially, currently, so the EU model, I believe, this is all obviously very much up in the air, is that they want an equal split to be paid, because the theory is that the machines have learned all songs ever. They want royalties to be split between everyone. How on earth this will ever be tracked?
between everyone, what?
Like who could be put into the data set. So they'd want the AI companies to reveal the data set they've used in order to create the prompts. So then they could pay the original songwriters.
Gotcha.
Or producers or whoever. Singers.
Gotcha. So you'll be making less than a Spotify.
No one knows. It's just theory. The other thing is obviously if they're behind a paywall, that's one way, because then you could split the membership fees between the songwriters. I have no idea. That's the concern, really, is for a royalty perspective, is that, and we're seeing it already with Spotify, is that like Spotify is already being flooded with like generative music or like brown noise or white noise, and that's hundreds of thousands of releases a week of this that isn't really created music. It's a problem. It's a major problem, but I don't have the answer for you. Sorry. If I did, I would be earning a lot of money in a court right now. It's far above my pay grade.
Now, to be fair, though, I think it really, even, you know, for myself, it really opens up a different paradigm, because I think the difficulty is when, you know, if you work a day job and you might not be necessarily involved within music and publishing, and we'll touch on what that actually is, because to be honest, I'm not even 100% sure myself. You don't really understand the implications, I guess. And I know there's, you know, a lot of my friends who are producers and also DJs.
Yeah.
They've asked themselves the same question. And I think, you know, you putting your input has been very valuable to at least open up a paradigm of discussion.
Nice.
Let's go back to, if it's okay with you, you've mentioned obviously you're within music publishing. If I'm completely honest with you, I don't know the back of my hand when it comes to like the music business, which is quite...
Same.
Well, I'm sure you know more than I do. Talk to me a little bit about, so is A&Ring the same as publishing, or?
I am a publishing A&R.
Okay.
So when you think of A&Rs, traditionally, I guess you think of record label A&Ring,
Yes.
which would be the signing and journey of a record to like the master side recording. So it would be like either going out and finding an artist or finding a record or having it come into you and signing it and putting it out.
Yes.
I work and sign writers. So that could be a producer, that could be a songwriter, it could be a vocalist and an artist performer. But it's more working the creation of the record than the release of the record. So like I work with the songs rather than releasing the songs.
Like making the songs is, okay.
So it's putting artists in sessions, collaborations, that kind of thing, rather than releasing records and marketing the records.
Gotcha. So from obviously from your perspective, I mean, we can touch on the releasing NR side in a second if you know a little bit about that. But from your perspective, obviously you're looking for writers, for vocalists, so on and so forth. How do you go about finding the people to use for production?
So it's kind of like, I guess the processes are the same for records and publishing. Like we all kind of have the same tools, which is like DSPs, be that Spotify, and digging through playlists. And
DSPs are I generally don't know.
Essentially they're like online music stores.
Okay,
like
that's fine.
platforms
That's fine.
of so say Spotify or Beatport or
Gotcha.
Apple Music, whatever.
Cool.
So they're like essentially the digital stores.
Digital stores, okay.
Yeah. So you'd go through these like curated playlists, maybe find artists, maybe you'll go on SoundCloud and see a track blowing up, and then follow them on Instagram and kind of follow that route. It's the same basically for both sides. Obviously with like non-performing writers, so like I work with some songwriters who don't release, so they'll just be in the room helping create lyrics and melodies. That's a bit more difficult to kind of find people because you wouldn't find them in the same ways, but then you'd go through like, if you open up Spotify, you can go to show credits, which would have like written, performed, produced by, and you'd find people's names through there.
Interesting. Didn't know that.
There you go. It's a relatively recent feature on Spotify because they pay songwriters so terribly. They at least need to give them something.
So basically, let's say, for example, just to run an example through. So you go on Spotify, you find a track that you like the vocalist, or I don't know, maybe the sort of like piano bit, whatever. So you then reach out to them and just say, hey, look, we got this project in mind. Or how does that process?
Yeah, potentially. It depends what it is. Like I'm working a project at the moment where it's like we look after the producers and kind of writers, and they're looking for vocalists for the project, quite open, like brief. So if I hear something that I think will be good, I'll just grab the Spotify or grab the Instagram, send it through to the team, be like, what do you think about maybe this? And then you'd go through a process of maybe arranging a day in the studio, like a session, and like trying to triangulate the whole thing, finding the space. Or if it's like a touring producer, a lot of the time they want acapellas, that kind of thing. Yeah,
so the vocalist just recording the acapella and sending
and sending it through. They might have a bank already, or there's an instrumental, say for example, and we're trying to find a vocal for an instrumental. You just reach out with the instrumental.
Yeah, this is just instrumental.
Being like, do you want to write to this, basically?
Yeah. But, how does the I'm again, like I've said, like the business side for me, I don't really know that well. How does it work from a monetary perspective? Like if you're finding, like a vocalist, for example, and let's say you've got the producer who's made the instrumental, then obviously how does that work in terms of split? Is it like a 50-50 thing?
It really depends. Like in terms of like publishing, again, it just depends on what the people have kind of agreed to. A lot of the time you do kind of equally split it by the people who are in the room at the time. Like in America, it's a lot more contentious that people will be like, oh, I did 5% more than you or whatever. Because what do you base that on? You know what I mean? Like, but they do. Like they'll have like musicologists that will come in and be like,
musicologists.
yeah.
What the hell is it?
It's someone's job to kind of like scientifically analyze music. So people do go in and be like, this contributes X amount to this.
No way, really?
But like most of the time you kind of agree equally. And then on like, say like the master side, so like label releasing.
Yeah.
It really depends on what the setup of the deal is. So sometimes like the vocalist will get a fee. Sometimes the vocalist will get a fee and a royalty split. Sometimes they'll just get a royalty split. It's kind of like, it really depends what the deal is.
Gotcha. How would that translate into, I guess, the publishing, like the more underground music side? Because obviously if people do collaborations, right? And, someone's laying down the drums, someone's laying down the I don't think you make that much money anyway, right? From like Spotify streams and other avenues. So does that really matter? Is it like a contractual thing, or is it just like...
Well, there's no contractual thing unless there's a contract that says there is. Like, if it's just you and your mates releasing a tune and you distribute it yourself, there's no contract at all. Like, realistically, you just kind of agree between yourselves. Like, the majority of, I guess, those type of writers, producers probably wouldn't have a PRS account, so they wouldn't register the songs anyway. So no one would be collecting the publishing money. PRS is like the UK's Performing Rights Society, so that's what pays royalties to songwriters.
Gotcha.
So like, it could, Radio 1 plays, or like there will also be a publishing split in Spotify.
You can tell I ain't released a track yet. No, that's quite interesting, because I think one of the things I've thought about, obviously, I don't really know. I think I've seen some stories around, if you get a Beatport #1, off the back of that, you may like 4 or 5 grand, at best maybe make 4 or 5 grand.
It's totally dependent on
exactly. Yeah. So I was then kind of thinking, like, how would you go about, if you do a collaboration, how would you go about in terms of split and so on and so forth?
But that would be in the if you're the record label, you'd have to write that into your contract of how it's getting split and distributed between the people involved. Like, if you are signed to a record label that then puts that will be in the contract, like the breakdown of whatever the split is to you. Potentially, if there's other people involved, that will all be agreed when it's signed, basically. So
you'd basically obviously pitch your track to the label, they'd agree that they want to sign it, and eventually in the contract, hey. At the same time, obviously, they'd agree they want to sign it, and off the back of that, obviously, they can distribute it as they want.
There'd just be a contract, which you can obviously go back and debate, but it will be whatever terms they normally use on the label. I don't know. It really depends on whatever the release is. There's no hard and fast rule. So they'd get paid the royalties to the label, and then the label would pay them out periodically on whatever you've agreed. I don't know.
Gotcha. I just want to take it back, if it's okay with you. I think we've touched on it a couple of times, actually, to be fair. But I want to take it back to you. Your productions wise, you've mentioned, not necessarily because you're not templated, but just because you love exploring sounds and love exploring productions. And, having a look at the different types that you've released over time, I already knew you were quite diverse, but I don't think I quite realized how diverse you were, going from, like Duboko, which is quite very minimal, to Under No Illusion. And, you had circus recordings on there and quite a lot throughout the time. How... From the way I see it, and feel free to correct me, by the way, what I've noticed in general is like people tend to stick to one particular sound because they get known for that sound. So then they find it easy to promote that sound. So from your perspective, having such a wide range and variety of things that you produce, have you found that to be beneficial? Have you found it to be a hindrance in terms of like promoting it, I guess, and building... Yeah.
No, it's a very good question. It's a terrible way to build an artist career by doing a lot of things. Like, if I was looking at an artist from a signing perspective who did 20 different things from a label side anyway, or as a promoter, and you can't...
You haven't apologized this time.
Sorry. It's very difficult to kind of place people, like you're saying. It's essentially, music is a marketing game in the modern day. So, it's always kind of been that, but especially now. And if people don't really know how to place you, it becomes it's quite difficult to move forward with it. I just like doing that. It's not good advice. Probably don't do it. But for me, it's like my heroes all kind of do that. Yeah. Like Scream jumps around through everything. Dennis Ferrer will jump around through everything. Derek Carter can jump around through everything. And it's kind of like, I grew up being inspired by people like that. I don't look at like, I love this style of music, which I like a lot of music. Yeah. I don't go, I want to be this person, really. I'm kind of like, I listen to a lot of music. I collect a fucking load of music. Yeah. It makes sense for me to be able to push that in a way. And I think like I did it relatively successfully because I'd kind of got to a point where people had known me for that, and it might have been through the Human Shazam track IDing thing or releasing quite a varied amount of music and the people I was working with, that there was like a general acceptance that you could kind of slot me into anywhere and I'll provide, because it's not like I'm going to go and play like a house night and go and play a scary techno set, because I care much more about the culture and the craft than that. For sure. I don't know. I see it as a challenge, man. I find it fun.
I think, mate, to be fair, I think it's quite inspiring, because one of the things that I've been thinking about is like, if you look like you mentioned yourself, you're like Dennis Ferrer, for example. And to be fair, a big one for me is like Carl Cox, man. Yeah. Like Carl Cox, who used to play across the spectrum. You know what I mean? And like another big one for me, I think people don't use the microphone enough. They see it as like the bad thing to do when you play a set, but that's a different story. But he played across the spectrum and, used to play techno sets, used to play house sets.
But I think...
Go on, sorry.
No, I was going to say, I just think that's a kind of change in the culture generally. Like, it's become very short form. Like, the sets are shorter. It's very much marketed to a T and programmed to a T of being like, this is what this event is. And especially more so since COVID, is it's kind of like there's a lot less variety on lineups. And as a result, your bookings do tend to dry up if you're doing various different things because of what you're saying. From a marketing perspective, it makes sense to be like, this is what I do.
Yeah.
So I think that's it's just very different culturally now. Like if you're playing like Carl Cox in the late 80s and early 90s, you're playing 8-9 hours of vinyl, you have to have a load of different music because you need options. And
can't be minimal tech.
You've got to make people enjoy themselves and have variation and flow through the night. It's a nice little move. But it's the same with all of these people, is they all play kind of like extended sets. And I don't know, man. I feel really deeply passionate about like long form electronic music.
Yeah. But so what do you think drove us in this direction? Because I'll be completely honest, I'm in the same boat, right? For me, in complete honesty, I feel like these, not only not having the ability to be able to go through a catalogue of music, because no one DJ or producer is only stuck to like a minimal tech or a tech house or whatever it might be. Like, I also would love to see on lineups like longer sets. Mate, I don't get started till about like 45 minutes in. And by the time I get started, like the first hour's gone. Like I'm pretty much done. So I've kind of got a theory behind this, but like, what's your opinion? Like, what do you think sort of drove us in this direction?
It's just ticket sales. Like, it's like the more people you have promoting a party as their own, the more people they will bring. Like if you are a party who sells tickets without a lineup, you will have longer sets because you're not worrying about, we need to have this crowd and this crowd, or like this person will bring 40 mates, 50 mates. Because you're not worried about that. You then focus solely on musical programming. It's a shame. It's just the nature of things. It's not I'm not here slagging off short sets. Like I, as a part-time promoter, will also have to have short sets at times because it's just the nature of it currently. But yeah, I think it makes it massively difficult, and it's why I guess like you don't have people that operate in the same way as like Carl Cox used to.
Yeah. Do you prefer shorter or longer?
Definitely longer. It's like I like same as you. I'm kind of like, I don't feel like I really get it until 40 minutes in. I have quite a weird style of DJing anyway, whereas it is a lot of like trying stuff out because I come from such like a DJ background, not an artist producer background, at least mentally. Clearly, I've been fucking releasing music for 10 years. Like I'm not, I also have that background, but mentally I'm like, all right, I need to prove myself in this room. Like I need to make people have the best time possible, which means I'm cycling through various different bits until I figure out what it is exactly that's working, and then I go down a tangent. That's why I collect so much music.
Yeah.
So I definitely prefer longer sets.
Gotcha. I think you mentioned a really interesting point earlier, to be honest with you, that I want to touch upon. And you've mentioned, obviously, like with the smaller nights, you're booking multiple DJs because, essentially you want to make sure that they bring as many people as possible. And, from my experience, with sort of Midnight Groovy when I ran it, only for a year at the time, and we did 3 parties and stuff. But I kind of had the same sort of thought.
It's not just smaller parties, it's bigger lineups. If you look at bigger lineups, they're stacked. But for that reason, it's like you're tapping into as many fan bases as possible. That's what it is.
True.
It's market share.
Do you think there's any way around that?
Don't know, not currently.
There's
just not enough people buying tickets for events. Like, I don't know if it's the interest in the music has waned or like it's a cultural thing post-COVID, whatever. It will probably come back around. There's always these lulls and waves. Obviously, you're in the middle of a recession in the UK, which definitely doesn't help.
Yeah.
You've got rising costs in events. Yeah, it is. I don't know. I guess it will come back around eventually. The culture won't die. We're 40 years in.
Because I think, very true.
50 years in.
No, it's true. Because I think that I was sort of thinking about the fact that I know this is like the basic thing that people say, because I've noticed a little bit of a dwindling in events especially over the last sort of year and a half too. But I guess when you look at like the cost of living that's continuously going up, people got less and less money. Like my food shop's gone from like 60 quid to 120 quid a week, pretty much.
Jeez.
Like nearly give or take double.
What are you buying?
Meat. A lot of meat.
No meat.
I thought that might be a factor that sort of affected the whole dynamic as well.
Yeah, of course. 100%.
That kind of leads us quite nicely on to, I know that you're part of Raw, right?
Yeah.
And I've been to a couple of the parties, especially love the one in Manchester. I forgot what it's called, but the hall with the swimming pool.
Victoria Baths.
That one. That was a sick party. When did that start? And are you do you just DJ there? Do you organize?
Yeah, so it's like, I think is it 9 years this year it's been going for?
Right, really?
Yeah. So it started as a student party in Liverpool.
Gotcha.
Which I started playing as a resident from the first birthday. But originally it was quite like multi-genre, almost like electronic, but like the first birthday I played after gigs. So it was like, it was quite open. It was very much a student-y thing. But with a primary focus more so than like booking lineups, it was using spaces. Like that was obviously a special one with the book gigs, but a lot of the time was like, we used to use Williamson Tunnels, which was basically the first party to ever use that venue in Liverpool that then became so iconic that it became an actual venue. I think it still is an actual venue. It does quite well. So it was a focus on spaces, and obviously this went on for this 9 years this year. So that naturally kind of progressed as we went into different cities. I became more involved with it. The people who run it, Chris and Liam, shout them out, are exceptionally busy with their other events companies. They do nearly 100 shows a year of different types of things, from like festival size to... They did last weekend like a showcase for Heather Small in a cathedral fire. So they're very busy. So naturally over time, it was kind of like, I love Raw. Like it's like our fun baby. So I naturally got more involved with the organizing side of things, which is like kind of like part of the back end promoting, but also like advising on lineups, programming, that kind of thing.
Fair. I want to ask a question around sort of like the sort of back end of organizing parties, I guess, maybe from, from what you know, maybe some of the experiences that you've had. From the promoters that I know that have put parties on, a relatively sort of small to medium size to begin with, let's say within its infancy, in the first, 2 years, you're building a fan base, you're understanding your demographic, you're trying to get people to the party, so on and so forth. Economically, it's not really the most viable thing to do, right? I think people don't understand the kind of costs that go into it, especially if you're booking an artist who, maybe international and who's flying over, having their technical rider.
It's not an easy, quick buck.
Exactly. Which point do you think a sort of party gets to a point where, it starts becoming economically viable? Because I think I know it's like a how long's a piece of string type of thing.
It's just the risks change. Yeah. You go from being like, we want some people to come so we can break even and then hopefully scale it up the next thing, to then being like, we are spending a lot of money on talent and then just hoping that the talent or the people buy into the fact that you spent so much money on a lineup. The issues are different. I think especially now, like, bigger parties are struggling more than ever. Like, you're seeing daily festivals are being cancelled because the operational costs are so much higher and the lineup costs are just out of this world currently. So, like, I don't know if it necessarily does ever get to a point of being like naturally viable. Yeah. Well, like, it just never. It's a gamble. Like, if you're doing it to make money, you're in the wrong game, because it's a lot of stress to potentially not make any money. Potentially lose money. So I don't know, man. I don't know. I wish there was an easy magic wand to be like, this is the point and it works that point. But the issues just change.
No, I mean, and 100% I agree, because I think that's sort of why I've asked the question. I found that it's an incredible networking tool. Mm-hmm. I think parties are an incredible networking tool to be able to access, artists who may not necessarily give you the access, but they come into play to your party, you get face-to-face time with them, you get to introduce yourself and so on and so forth. So I think it's great in terms of that, if you consider it as a marketing cost. You know what I mean? But like you said yourself, it's a lot of effort.
It's a lot of stress, sleepless nights, effort and money to just sink it into marketing cost.
Exactly.
Which obviously a lot of people do, which is great. And like, honestly, most of my favorite parties to play are parties run by people who aren't doing it for monetary reasons, because they're just better. Because the production is fun, like the lineups are fun. But like, I'm very much aware, like, the economic state of everyone's situation, and it's not necessarily people who are struggling traditionally, it's just everyone. It's got so much harder for that those kind of parties have ceased to really happen as much. It's a shame, man, because like, it's for like mid-ish tier, low mid-tier, I guess, if I'm including myself kind of in that lower tier of artists. Those parties, those parties kind of just disappeared after COVID, because the operational costs are so much higher that like the margins just don't exist for that kind of like smallish cap, interesting lineup shows. Yeah,
with sort of like obviously, if you're okay to dive into this, but with Raw, how is it organized? Is it everyone like a DJ producer and then they have their own little sort of like responsibilities inside the team?
No. Chris and Liam aren't DJ producers. They're
don't
promoters.
play.
No,
See,
full-time event promoters.
See, man, this is because I was talking to Paris when he was here on the last show. From my experience anyway, like for parties to be successful, and I don't know if you agree with this or disagree, but you can sort of go on it. But I think that you need to have at least one person who's specifically dedicated to being like what you'd call like the promoter, right? Like the back end promoter who has no interest in playing. Yeah. Like his sole specialization is how do I make this party grow? Like, and obviously if they've got some sort of social media skill set, great. Exactly. If they've got some marketing background, great. Because having 3 DJs and producers is great in the wider scheme of if you run a label and then you want to grow that label and become a sort of
collective thing.
Like a collective, like a musical movement.
100%.
But I think at the like smaller level, like a startup, you won't have the same skill sets in a startup. You'll have a salesperson, a legal person, an HR person, and so on and so forth. That's why it's quite interesting to know.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's kind of how it's almost the other way around with Raw. That's how I like got involved with it, was being more like the musical creative brain,
the musical sicko.
Yeah, no, exactly. Rather than the back end promoter brain, it was more of like that's what we kind of decided was going to help going forward. Yeah.
From a promotion perspective, in terms of events, do you have any sort of take on what you think is useful in today's day and age to have like a successful marketing promotion plan, or like what you think could work?
I just think it's all data. Like, as much as you can do to collect people's data, it means you're going straight to them. You're then trying to, like, say, for example, obviously, when you sell tickets, you then keep the people's email information to sell tickets to them again directly next time. Anything you can do to collect.
Is that through Skiddle?
Yeah, well, wherever you sell your tickets, you can get it.
I've obviously been sleeping.
But you can get the information because it's in your database of people who bought tickets. But, like, it just means that you can... the data retention and capturing you can use to directly target people. If you're just solely relying on social media, you have to cut through all the other noise of social media. It's like, if there's ways that you can use social media to increase your data capturing, great. Because that's the like a lot of the big successful like promotions companies are successful because they have so much data that you can feed it directly to the people you're trying to sell to. You don't have to cut through selfies and dog pictures on the timeline. It's
What are some of the ways of gathering data that you know of?
Yeah, like the traditional like things are obviously like a way a lot of people used to use a few years ago is kind of like free parties. So you could sell 2,000 tickets or free tickets of people that might be interested in coming to your parties. Most of those probably won't attend. There's always a big drop off on those things. But then you have the people's information so that when you launch the next paid one, obviously those have kind of dried up because, again, the operational cost of doing it is that's essentially then a marketing tool. But yeah, stuff like that. I think like if you're running a label as well, you can do like free downloads that mean that you need to put people's details in. Again, obviously you're then kind of only getting the data of DJ producers, but I also think having a lot of people who are super into the music and maybe want to play at your party is probably quite a good way of promoting it.
Sure,
makes it quite attractive.
They've also got friends, right? That's quite interesting because I've thought about this in a little bit of depth when, eventually at some point when maybe I've got the right team in place and decided I do want to return with Midnight, I was kind of thinking like, how would I go about gathering data, and I've seen, I think it's in Birmingham, I think Heavy Events, for example, they've got their own little sort of like checkout page where, you can...
like a landing page.
Yeah, like a landing page that you can use. And I thought that was a very good idea.
Definitely. I think stuff like that's great. Is like you can have it, so you can even do it on a link tree. You don't even need to have a separate like landing page where you've just got a button. We've got one for Raw, but it just literally just like you put in your email address and you can be sent stuff beforehand. I think like having that kind of feel of exclusivity is great. Like you see a lot of parties now try and do like WhatsApp groups, Telegram groups. So you've got, again, that direct line to consumer. And if you can create a beautiful landing page that kind of sells the story of the party with a nice little email box in, great.
Yeah. So do you sell the tickets on the landing page or do you sell them
it depends what your ticketing setup is. Like if you've got a partner, like Raw's partner with Skiddle, so like you'd send it to Skiddle, but you could embed that in theory. I'm not a back-end software developer, so I guess you can. You can see Skiddle's like little interface on other websites, so I'm guessing you could.
No, fair. So I probably should have said at the beginning, I guess, that there will be like a little important announcement at the end. But I didn't, I kind of flustered the introduction. Give me time, people. It's only the second one. We'll get there. But I believe there's a very important announcement that you have to make, and I'll let you do it.
Yeah, so kind of the extension of, I guess, what I was talking about earlier, be it my weird lens of producing different types of music or my love of long-form electronic music is kind of, that's what's brought me to this point. All of these different chats kind of have led me to this idea of being like, if I want to market myself, like we were saying, as someone who does a lot of things, it's very difficult to do that through other people's kind of systems. So me and my friends have tried a various different amount of things of being like, oh, should we try this? Should we try this? And the way we've settled on it is I am launching a new label, Imprint / kind of like lifestyle platform thing. It's called Poles Apart, which is me.
Love the name.
It's great. Me delving into all of my different influences in electronic music, releasing monthly for the next foreseeable. Like there's a vault of 250 tunes. So in theory, I could never make a record again and we will keep Poles in it forever. But yeah, it's been a really lovely project. Like from start to finish, it's kind of all me. So like I've produced everything, mixed it. I've done the artwork. A lot of each piece of the artwork has a separate like photo that I've taken. A lot of them are on the days of the trunk.
You've taken the actual photo.
Yeah.
I see.
A lot of the photos were taken on the day of the actual creation of the tune, or when I've made them, it's like something that reminds me of the tune. So like it's a super creative project because no one can tell me anything. It's been really interesting because I think it's like all of these things that have happened, be it from me doing it for myself for years and then getting to a decent level of feeling like there was an acceptance of me being able to kind of do my own thing, and then having like COVID and trying to rebuild things afterwards without, I guess, a kind of like clear brand identity, because me doing a lot of things isn't really a clear brand identity unless that's the brand. Unless that's the brand.
That is the brand identity.
So that's what we're doing now. So it's kind of been a really lovely thing because I have then taken all of these things that I've learned and also from the day job side and can nearly exclusively do it all myself, which means it feels like a super passionate project and I love it. And I've never been so proud of anything in my life.
Yeah. How long has it been in the works?
The idea has always kind of been there. It's just kind of the execution. Like some of the first records, which will be probably in the first year of the project, I probably started making through COVID when I was first experimenting with it.
Yeah.
The formulation of like actually sorting out the back end of it has been like I think it's been since January, really.
Yeah.
Like various things happened last year that kind of just made me take a step back and reflect on how I was going to do everything. So it's been kind of putting it all into place. So yeah, the first one comes out on the 9th of May.
Nice. We'll link it below, by the way, for you guys that want to follow. I think is an amazing name, by the way, because I think it so describes exactly what the label is going to provide. But what I did want to get into a little bit, if it's okay with you, is generally speaking, you know, when you're going against what would be, I guess, the trend of the industry, you know, like, because you like producing over different sort of genres as opposed to sticking to just the one, for example. Yeah. I remember I've recently done something quite similar, like mental exercise with this, to be honest, with the podcast, because I kind of thought like, you know, I'm a DJ producer. Do I really want to get seen as a podcaster? Like, does that fit in with the brand of a DJ producer?
Yeah.
And then you sort of understand that, hold on a minute, like, who says, like, that is the brand that you're just going to be a DJ producer who loves to bore people on a video from time to time, right? So, but mentally, like, what was like that for you? Was it quite an easy, like, sort of, you know, I'm just gonna, you know, build my own table and have my own label?
No, definitely not. Like, this has been an internal struggle basically for like 5 years of trying to figure out a way to kind of present everything.
Just in case you missed it, 5 years.
Like, this isn't a whim thing of me being like, oh, this is a really good idea. It's kind of been like a back and forth with friends and family and like the people closest with me to be like,
what do you guys think?
How can I kind of bring all this together in one way? And I don't think without the time I'd have been able to do it. It's like taken a lot of like work experience and life experience and musical experience to get to that level to feel comfortable to actually do it myself.
Yep.
So yeah, I don't know, man. Like it's it feels super exciting, but like also it's incredibly personal.
Yeah.
So like I've never felt as weirdly nervous about music, but at the same time, because I'm very aware that I am stepping outside, you've kind of got a brace that it's not as easily like accepted. And it's not like I'm not here making like a Russian noise album. Like it's not that bizarre. Like a lot of them will be quite clubby to a degree, but it's just kind of not wanting to present the music as solely a tool to be played. It's just come from loads of conversations over the years, really. And like the records that I love the most and mean the most to me are quite difficult to kind of place in places. Like I had a conversation with Scream, and I don't know if it was about one of the tunes that will probably come out in polls. And he was basically like, Josh, I love this. Like I'll put it out on Others Unsigned Mind, but you know, by this point, like that isn't really going to help you as much as it needs to, because people expect that from you. Like I've done 3 releases with him and like, it's great and I love it. And I'm so proud of those records. But at the same time, it's like we do another one. It's kind of just like, here's another one.
Yeah.
And then me like releasing on there and various other labels it's really hard to kind of get an overall image of what it is that I do, because it kind of would be scattergunned in various different places. Yes. And then I'll play a set playing this kind of music and I'll play a set playing this kind of music, which is fine with me. But from a storytelling perspective, it's really hard to kind of show off. Whereas I'm like, if it's all in one place, that's the story.
Yeah.
The story isn't that I can do this and I can do this, I can do this. The story is that I will and am doing all of this.
Yeah. What do you think was the catalyst for you to be able to say, you know what, I'm just going to do it?
I don't know. It's been such a long process. I think there were a couple of like, I don't know, my understanding of the back end of music through the day job has increased quite significantly over the last couple of years, to the point where, I don't know, like traditional label models don't really make much sense to me anymore, unless you're getting an additional offering of, be it like it's a party as well, or there's, I don't know, an advance or something else is being offered as well as just releasing music, because distribution is so simple now for like anyone to release music. Like I could record this now, send it to distribution and get it on Spotify. Like when you to the point where, sorry, I'm like, I think the catalyst was I've seen like releases of mine that have gone a certain way, and I'm like, I think I could execute that better myself, because I understand the product better and I understand the story better, and I can sell it as this is me, not here's me releasing on this label that it doesn't really fit sonically because I don't know where it fits.
No, mate, that's amazing, because I think the reason I'm asking you that question, by the way, is basically, I feel like sometimes, especially because you mentioned it was a very long period of time what I'm really trying to get across is on the micro level of like the feelings that you feel when you're trying to make these decisions in your head of like which direction do I want to go with, not only just music, but I think in general life, the big decisions that you have to make, whether it's, you know, starting your own label or doing a podcast or whatever it might be. I'm just trying to sort of really just get across to, you know, the viewers that basically it's not you just wake up one morning and it's like, yeah, I've decided I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
It's over a long period of time. You go and you talk to the people around you and use people to basically understand how to, if you want to, first of all, because you kind of gauge the reaction of how you feel by talking about it to other people.
Yeah, 100%. And like, I think some people do just turn up and go, this is a great idea, and we'll learn it afterwards. And I'm so jealous of people like that.
Yeah,
I'm far too anxious to be able to do anything without running it past 1 million people. It's why it took me so long to learn to make music, because I was doing it on my own and scared to show anyone. But like, I don't know. I like, to me, the whole concept of it is like the community. Like a lot of the photos are of Brum and like friends and family. And like, to me, it's the whole thing. That's why it's so personal, because it's not about like me going, I want to sell a load of records and, I don't know, chart on Beatport or whatever. It's kind of like, I actually wanted to create a body of work that I can always be proud of. And like, regardless, I'm proud of nearly everything I've ever released because of that like mentality. Like I've never really just done stuff to kind of push things forward, which is a terrible piece of career advice. But like my own mentals, I don't think would ever let me allow to do that.
I say,
so it's kind of like now, yeah, no, literally. But like, I don't know. It feels great. And like, who knows? It's really hard to tell, but the music's ace. And I know that's biased me saying it, but it is.
No, mate, to be fair, I'm really looking forward to hearing like what's coming out. When did you say the first one's? May?
First one's May the 9th, and then it will be near enough monthly. Well,
Monthly
it will be monthly.
Okay.
I just don't have the second date firmed, but it will be like first or second week of the month, every month, forever.
Gotcha. I love that. Is it just going to be sort of like Josh Gregg releases to forever, or is it going to be a point where people might be able to?
I think it will just be me. Like initially, maybe I'll collaborate with like friends or like but I don't think I'd accept like submissions just because it's not really the point of it. Like, and that it's not. It sounds self-indulgent, but it's not that. It's more like it feels quite personal to me. It's like it's my kind of like it's my kind of like diary almost of like. All of these songs I feel like connected to in a way, and I could tell the story of all of them. And if it's someone else's, as much as I might love the record, it's not the storytelling of them, isn't it? It's not my story to tell.
Yeah. No, that's super interesting. With the records themselves, I mean, in terms of like the promo, is there going to be like a story behind it in terms of like the tracks when they get released? You know, maybe how it came to fruition, or
kind of like I think each of them have quite an interesting tale, so there will be hopefully like some types of visual content. I don't know if I'll dabble in the whole like track breakdown side of things because I don't know. It's a weird thing to explain because I'm very well aware that my like primary audience is DJ producers and sickos, but like to me it's almost like delivering music in this way, and the whole project has kind of been like a not streaming first, but like releasing in a traditional way first before like releasing to play, because I'm very well aware that a lot of them are kind of like semi-difficult to play. Yeah. So I don't know, it'll probably be like dabbling in different types of media, like some spoken stuff, don't know, some of the photography stuff, maybe like some physical things. Like I've dabbled in the idea of kind of like doing a gallery of all the artworks because like I love them, and I'm not the greatest photographer in the world, but like to me art's all like subjective and it's feeling, and it's kind of like they evoke the sense of kind of like what the music is. I know. It'll be a combination of things really. It's very much, this is the joy of doing a DIY project, is it's kind of all being like figured out on the fly. Like it helps that I have quite a good back end understanding of music, but like in terms of the promo stuff, we'll figure it out, because like obviously I'll do my traditional like DJ promo in, because kind of like I know a lot of these people. Yeah. But when the records aren't primarily like club records, it's a bit harder to do. So I don't know, it's a mixture of kind of things, like some blog stuff, hopefully, like some mag stuff, fingers crossed, like radio plays, doing things like this as well, like sitting down and kind of trying to long form discuss like the topics rather than break it up into 16 seconds clips, because I'm very well aware that like someone like me doesn't do well in that format. No, neither do I. Just like my music doesn't do well in that kind of format. So it's kind of like, I don't know, trying some different stuff out. Yeah, fair. Well, mate, to be honest with you, I can't wait to actually hear the stuff when you put it out. Maybe we get some previews. You can. But it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm sure, you know, there is a lot in there that is of value, and we've covered everything from like, you know, events, the publishing side, differentiation of music. And to be honest, I am really interested to see how this will play out moving forward. Yeah, man. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you, man. And we can do that too. Appreciate it, man. And we'll catch you guys on the next one. Nice one. Thank you.